The crimson warships dropped out of hyperspace like falling stars, 50 of them arranged in perfect geometric patterns above the small colony world. Admiral Cray watched through the viewport as Brentus 7 spun below, a blue and green marble holding 3 million lives. Most of them were humans, traders and their families who had built something peaceful here on the edge of known space. Cray felt nothing looking at it. He had done this 43 times before, at 43 different worlds. The Valorian Empire conquered, that was simply what they did. His people were superior in every way that mattered. Better technology, better tactics, better breeding. The galaxy needed order, and Valoria provided it. "Open a channel to the surface," Cray ordered. His communications officer complied instantly, and Cray's face appeared on every screen across Brentus 7. He delivered the same speech he always gave, word for word. Submit within 6 hours or face complete destruction. Surrender meant survival under Valorian rule. Resistance meant death from orbit. Down on the planet, Colony Administrator Diane Foster sat in her office and listened to the ultimatum with her hands clasped tight. She was a practical woman who had spent 20 years building this colony from nothing. Her people trusted her to keep them safe, and now 50 warships hung above them like executioners. Axis dock, she dismissed the transmission and pulled up a communications console. Her fingers moved across the controls, entering coordinates that she had memorized years ago but prayed she would never use. The type beam message shot out into deep space, traveling toward a point in the outer dark where no planets existed and no stars shone close. 3 words: "They're here, help." Cray's tactical officer noticed the transmission immediately. "Admiral, the colony just sent a message." Tight beam, highly focused. "Sent to empty space approximately 40 light hours out." The Admiral laughed. It was not a kind sound. "Empty space? They're calling for help from nothing. How desperate." He turned to his weapons officer. "Begin charging the bombardment array. When the 6 hours expire, I want to be ready to demonstrate the price of defiance." 5 hours crawled past. On Brentus 7, people fled into underground shelters that had been built for asteroid strikes and solar storms. They huddled together in the dark, parents holding children, trying not to imagine what would come when the timer ran out. Diane stayed at her post, watching the countdown and trusting in something she could not see or prove above the planet. Cray grew impatient. The Valorian fleet maintained formation, 50 ships in the Crimson Crown pattern that had broken every defense it had ever faced. Weapon systems hummed with building energy. Targeting computers painted the surface with thousands of strike points. Everything was proceeding according to doctrine. At 5 hours and 53 minutes, every sensor in the Valorian fleet began screaming warnings. Tactical displays flooded with error messages. Gravity readings spiked and dropped in impossible patterns. Something was tearing at the fabric of space itself, ripping reality like cloth. "Report?" Cray snapped, gripping his command chair. "Unknown spatial distortion, Admiral. It's massive, bigger than anything in our database. Distance 40,000 kilometers off our port bow. Energy readings are off the scale. I can't even calculate the power requirements for something like this." Then the distortion vanished. Space returned to normal. Every sensor went quiet. The tactical officer checked and rechecked his instruments, finding absolutely nothing. "It's gone, sir." "Whatever it was, it just stopped?" Cray stared at the empty space where the distortion had been. A trick? Some kind of human technology meant to frighten him? Impossible. Humanity was young, barely 400 years into space travel. They had no superweapons, no advanced physics that could challenge Valorian supremacy. He raised his hand to give the bombardment order. His weapons officer prepared to relay the command to all 50 ships. The colony's time had expired, and now they would learn what happened to those who refused the Empire's mercy, reality. Cracked, there was no other way to describe what happened next. Space itself seemed to break like glass, fractures spreading across the blackened lines of brilliant white light. The gravity warnings came back even stronger, and this time they did not stop. Something was coming through, forcing its way into normal space through sheer brutal power. The fractures widened, and through them came something that made every Valorian ship look like a child's toy. 15 kilometers of matte black hull emerged from the self-made wormhole, fusion drives burning blue-white at the stern. The ship was not elegant or beautiful. It was a hammer forged in darkness, every surface speaking of violence and strength. Kray's tactical officer could barely speak. Identification coming through, Admiral. Human vessel. Classification: Dreadnought. Name: Titan's Wake. I'm reading power signatures equivalent to a small star. Hull composition unknown. Density readings are impossible. Nothing should be that heavy and still move. Weapon counts: I can't even begin to catalog the weapons, sir. The entire ship reads as a weapons platform. The Admiral stared at the thing that had appeared in his perfect formation like a shark among fish. One ship? One human ship against 50 Valorian warships? The arrogance was breathtaking. A transmission request came through. Kray accepted it, ready to teach these humans about reality. A woman's face appeared on his screen. She looked tired, worn down by years of service. Her uniform was plain and practical. Her eyes held no fear at all, just a kind of patient certainty that made something cold move in Kray's chest. "Admiral Kray," she said quietly, "you have 30 seconds to withdraw your fleet from Brentis 7 and leave this system. This is your only warning." 30 seconds was not enough time for Admiral Kray to process what he was seeing. His entire career had been built on Valorian superiority, on the absolute certainty that his people stood above all others in military might and tactical genius. Now this human woman offered him half a minute to abandon everything he believed and run like a coward. "You dare threaten the Valorian Empire with a single ship?" Kray's voice dripped with contempt. "I command 50 warships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering. Your people are barely children playing in space. Surrender now, and I will allow your crew to live as prisoners. Refuse, and I will add your wreckage to the examples I've made of 43 other worlds." Captain Rebecca Hayes did not change expression. She looked at him the way someone might look at a stubborn animal refusing to move from train tracks. Sad, almost resigned to what had to happen next. 20 seconds, Admiral," she said. Kray cut the transmission with an angry gesture. His face flushed purple with rage. "All ships, target that human vessel. I want every weapon locked on it. We will vaporize it and then proceed with the colony bombardment as scheduled." Across the Valorian fleet, weapon systems swiveled and locked. Plasma cannons charged to full power. Missile tubes opened like hungry mouths. Targeting computers painted Titan's Wake with thousands of firing solutions. 50 warships prepared to unleash enough firepower to crack a moon. Hayes watched her own countdown reach 0. She pressed a button on her command chair. "Weapons free. Show them why Earth builds dreadnoughts." The spinal railgun that ran the entire 15-kilometer length of Titan's Wake fired its first shot. The hyperdense tungsten uranium penetrator accelerated to 3% of light speed in the space of a single heartbeat. At that velocity, there was no defense. Shields were meaningless. Armor was paper. Physics became the only weapon that mattered. The projectile crossed the distance too. Kray's flagship in 1.3 seconds. The Pride of Valoria split in half. The penetrator punched through the forward section. Through the bridge where Kray stood in disbelief. Through the engineering section, through the fusion reactors, and out the other side without slowing. The two halves of the ship tumbled apart, atmosphere venting in frozen clouds. Internal explosions lighting up the wreckage like fireworks. Kray died without understanding what had killed him. One moment he commanded an unstoppable fleet. The next moment there was light and pain and then nothing at all. The Valorian formation broke like startled birds scattering from a predator. 50 ships became 50 individual targets. Each captain suddenly realizing that their perfect tactics meant nothing against an enemy who operated on a different level entirely. Hayes walked across her bridge with calm purpose. Targets bearing 270, 4 contacts. Fire solution Delta, missile tubes 3 through 10, launch when ready. 8 missiles left Titan's Wake, their fusion engines burning bright against the black. They were not simple explosives. Each one carried a nuclear-pumped X-ray laser that would fire once, in the microsecond before the bomb vaporized it, sending coherent radiation that could slice through starship hulls like knives. Through warm butter, 4 Valorian ships died in 4 blinding flashes of light. The human Dreadnought moved through space like something alive, fusion drives pushing it through vectors that should have torn apart anything its size. It accelerated hard toward a cluster of 6 Valorian ships trying to regroup, and its point defense arrays came online. Thousands of laser clusters tracked incoming missiles with perfect accuracy, creating a sphere of defensive fire that nothing could penetrate. Valorian captains fired everything they had. Missiles by the hundreds streaked toward Titan's wake, and every single one died in the defensive net. They detonated harmlessly, their fury spent against empty space while the Dreadnought closed the distance like a shark moving through a school of fish. Hayes called targets with the same calm voice she might use to order lunch. Forward batteries engaged targets at range 12,000 kilometers. Spread pattern. Titan's wake carried weapon systems that the Valorians could not even categorize. Particle beams that stripped away armor molecule by molecule. Electromagnetic pulse generators that fried electronics at range. And everywhere, always, the lasers. Hundreds of them, firing in coordinated patterns that found weak points in enemy shields and exploited them with surgical precision. 6 more. Valorian ships became expanding clouds of debris. The surviving Valorian captains tried to adapt, tried to use their superior numbers to overwhelm the single human ship. They coordinated firing patterns, attempted flanking maneuvers, employed every tactic that had won them an empire. Nothing worked. Titan's wake moved too fast, shot too straight, defended too well. Hayes fired the railgun twice more. 2 more Valorian ships split in half. She launched another missile salvo. 4 more ships died. The battle was not a battle at all. It was an execution, methodical and complete. 20 minutes after the first shot, the space around Brentis 7 held 47 expanding debris fields where Valorian warships had been. 3 ships remained, and they were running. Their captains had abandoned all pride, all doctrine, all thoughts of victory. They activated emergency hyperspace jumps, fleeing in 3 different directions without waiting for course calculations to finish properly. Hayes did not pursue them. Her orders had been clear: defend Brentis to 7, the colony was safe. The threat was eliminated. Everything else was secondary to that simple mission. She opened a channel to the surface. Administrator Foster, this is Captain Hayes of the Titan's wake. The Valorian fleet has been neutralized. We will maintain orbit until relief forces arrive. Your people are safe. Down on Brentis 7, in the underground shelters, 3 million people heard those words and began to cry with relief. They climbed out into the light and looked up at the sky where a human Dreadnought kept watch over them, and they understood that they were not alone in the darkness. Humanity protected its own. 3 Valorian ships emerged from hyperspace at 3 different core worlds, each one trailing damage and emergency signals. Their crews stumbled out of their vessels with the haunted eyes of people who had seen something impossible, something that broke their understanding of how the universe worked. Captain Drell was the first to reach Valorian High Command. He burst into the council chamber without requesting permission, still wearing his damaged uniform, his face covered in soot and dried blood. The assembled admirals looked at him with shock and growing anger at this breach of protocol. "Report yourself, Captain," Supreme Admiral Torin demanded. "Where is Admiral Cray? Where is the Conquest fleet?" "Dead," Drell said simply. "All dead. 47 ships destroyed in 20 minutes. The humans have something. A weapon. A ship. I don't even know what to call it." The council chamber fell silent. Torin stared at Drell as if the captain had started speaking an alien language. 47 ships? That's impossible. No single vessel could destroy an entire Valorian fleet. You must be mistaken. Perhaps you encountered a defense network or a minefield. Drell pulled a data chip from his pocket and threw it on the council table. That's my sensor logs. Watch it yourself. Watch one human ship tear through the finest fleet the Empire could assemble like we were nothing. Like we were insects. Supreme Admiral Torin inserted the chip into the chamber's main display. Every admiral present watched the footage in growing horror. They saw the pride of Valoria split in half. They saw perfect Valorian formations dissolve into chaos. They saw missiles die by the hundreds against defensive fire that never missed. They saw their people's ships reduced to scrap metal by weapons they could barely comprehend. Nobody spoke for a long time after the footage ended. Admiral Fenris, the Empire's chief tactical officer, finally broke the silence. "Run that back. Show me the part where it first fires." The footage rewound and played again. Fenris watched the railgun shot frame by frame, his expression growing darker with each replay. That projectile was traveling at relativistic speeds. 3% of light speed, maybe more. Do you understand what that means? There is no defense against kinetic energy delivered at those velocities. Not our shields, not our armor, nothing. "One ship cannot be that powerful," another admiral protested. "The power requirements alone would be impossible. The materials needed to withstand those forces don't exist." "They exist now," Drell said quietly. "I watch them work. The humans have been building these things while we conquered our little empire and thought ourselves masters of the galaxy. We're not masters. We're children who wandered into a den of sleeping tigers and we just woke one up." Torin pulled up intelligence files on humanity. The reports painted a picture of a relatively young species, only 400 years into space travel. Their territory was modest. Their colonies were few. They engaged in trade but rarely involved themselves in galactic politics. By every measure, they should have been insignificant. "Get me everything," Torin ordered. "Every intelligence report on human military capabilities. Every observation of their fleet movements. Every piece of data we have on their technology. I want to know exactly what we're facing." The intelligence division worked through the night. What they found made the situation worse, not better. Humanity did not have one Dreadnought. They had 17 confirmed vessels of this class, possibly more under construction. The ships operated in pairs or small groups, patrolling human space and responding to threats with terrifying speed. Worse still, the intelligence reports revealed that humans had been watching the Valorian expansion for decades. They had observed every conquest, noted every tactic, and prepared accordingly. The Dreadnoughts were not designed to fight equals. They were designed to fight superior numbers with overwhelming technological advantage. "They let us build our empire," Fenris said, reading through the reports. "They watched us conquer 43 worlds and did nothing. Why? Why not stop us? Before we became a threat? Because we were never a threat to them," Torin realized. The truth settled on him like a heavy weight. We were playing at war while they built real weapons. Every world we conquered was nowhere near human space. We were careful to avoid them because we sensed something dangerous even if we didn't admit it. And the moment we touched something they cared about, they showed us the difference between our power and theirs. The Council spent the next 3 days in continuous session, analyzing the battle footage, reviewing intelligence reports, and running tactical simulations. Every simulation ended the same way. Valorian fleets, no matter how large, could not defeat even a single human dreadnought. The technology gap was too wide. The humans had mastered engineering principles that Valoria barely understood. "What do we do?" Admiral Kress asked finally. She was young for her rank, brilliant but untested in real defeat. "Do we mass every fleet we have and attack Earth itself? Surely even humans cannot stand against our entire military." "And how many dreadnoughts defend Earth?" Torin asked quietly. "Intelligence suggests at least 6, possibly more. If we committed every ship we have to an attack on humanity's homeworld, we might destroy a few of their vessels, and in return, they would annihilate the entire Valorian fleet and leave our worlds defenseless. Is that an acceptable trade?" The Council had no answer. Torin stood and faced the assembled admirals. "For 2 centuries, the Valorian Empire has never retreated. We have never sued for peace. We have never shown weakness. All of that ends today? I am issuing a general recall of all expansion fleets. We move to a defensive posture immediately. No human colonies are to be approached. No human ships are to be engaged under any circumstances. We will send diplomatic envoys to request a ceasefire and negotiate terms. Several admirals protested, speaking of honor and pride and the Empire's reputation. Torrin silenced them with a look. Pride is a luxury we can no longer afford, he said. The choice is simple: we adapt to this new reality or we die. I choose adaptation. The question is, do you? One by one, the admirals gave their reluctant agreement. The age of Valorian expansion was over. Rebecca Hayes sat in her private quarters aboard Titan's wake, writing her after-action report. The room was small and functional, like everything else on the Dreadnought. No wasted space. No decorations. Just a desk, a bed, and a viewport showing the stars beyond. Her hands moved steadily across the keyboard, documenting the battle with clinical precision. 50 enemy vessels engaged. 47 destroyed. 3 escaped via emergency hyperspace jump. 0 casualties on human side. Hull integrity at 98%. Ammunition expenditure, minimal. Recommended action, maintain. Defensive posture until relief arrives. She paused at that last part, relief, as if Titan's wake needed help from anyone. The Dreadnought could hold this position for months without resupply. It could fight off 10 times as many Valorian ships and still emerge victorious. But orders were orders, and Hayes believed in following protocol even when it seemed unnecessary. Her door chimed. "Come in," she called. Lieutenant Wilson entered, carrying 2 cups of something that smelled vaguely like coffee but probably was not. Real coffee was expensive this far from Earth. "Thought you might want something warm, Captain. It's been a long day." Hayes accepted the cup gratefully. "Thank you, Wilson. Sit. You look like you have something on your mind." Wilson settled into the other chair, holding his own cup but not drinking. He was young, barely 30, and this had been his first real combat. "Can I ask you something? Off the record?" "Always. Those Valorian crews. They had families, right? People waiting for them to come home. And we just killed them all without even trying to negotiate further. Does that ever bother you?" Hayes sipped her not coffee and thought about the question. It was a good question. An important one. "Every single time," she admitted. "I think about it after every fight. Those people were following orders, same as us. They probably believed they were doing the right thing. Most of them never even got a shot off before they died. Then how do you do it? How do you give the order to fire knowing what it means? Because the alternative is worse," Hayes said quietly. "If we had hesitated, if we had spent hours in negotiations while the Valorians held Brentus 7 hostage, what would have happened? They would have bombarded the planet. 3 million people would have died. Men, women, children. Entire families erased in minutes." She set down her cup and looked Wilson in the eye. "We're not here to be fair to the people who threaten innocent lives. We're here to stop them, quickly, decisively, so completely that others think twice before trying the same thing. Is that what these ships are for? Intimidation? In a way. The Dreadnoughts exist so that wars like this don't have to happen. We're so powerful that fighting us is obviously suicide. Most species look at what we can do and choose peace instead. The Valorians just needed a reminder of why that's the smart choice." Wilson was quiet for a moment. "Did you know Admiral Cray ignored your warning on purpose? Intelligence says Valorian doctrine requires them to refuse any ultimatum. Their pride wouldn't allow retreat." "I know," Hayes said. "I counted on it, actually. That's why I only gave him 30 seconds. Not enough time to think, just enough time to react. He responded exactly as I expected, and now the galaxy has new footage of what happens when you threaten human colonies. Sometimes violence is the most merciful option in the long run. That's a hard way to look at it. This is a hard job. If it was easy, they wouldn't need people like us." Hayes pulled up a display showing Earth, impossibly distant but always present in her mind. "I have 2 daughters back home. They're 9 and 12. They don't know what I do out here, not really. They just know Mom protects people. And that's enough for me. I carry the weight of these decisions so they never have to. Wilson nodded slowly. Fleet Admiral Patterson sent a message while you were writing your report. The Dreadnought Thor's Hammer is being dispatched to join us here. He says 2 Dreadnoughts will send a clearer message to any Valorian hardliners thinking about revenge. Good. Double the protection for Brentis 7? And double the reminder of what happens if anyone else gets ambitious. Hayes stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. You know what I hope for, Wilson? I hope for a galaxy where ships like this one are obsolete. Where we build them and never fire them because everyone understands that cooperation is better than conflict. Do you think that's possible? Not yet. Maybe not in my lifetime. But we're moving toward it. 10 years ago, the Valorian Empire was conquering a new world every few months. Tomorrow, they'll be discussing peace terms because they learned we're not prey. That's progress. She turned back to her first officer. Every battle we win without celebrating it, every enemy we defeat without demonizing them, we move a little closer to that better galaxy. Wilson finished his not coffee and stood. I'll let you get back to your report. Thank you, Captain. For answering honestly. After he left, Hayes returned to her desk and continued writing. She documented everything with absolute accuracy, including her own thoughts and doubts. Future captains would read these reports and learn from them. That was part of the job, too. Not just fighting, but teaching others how to carry the burden of necessary violence. She finished the report and sent it to Fleet Command on Earth. Then she pulled up a personal file and wrote a letter to her daughters. She told them she loved them. She told them to study hard and be kind to others. She did not tell them about the Valorian ships or the people who died. They would learn that history eventually, but not from her. Some weights were meant to be carried alone. The neutral space station hung between stars like a pearl on black velvet, belonging to no empire and welcoming all who came in peace. This was where disagreements were settled with words instead of weapons, where treaties were signed and wars ended. Supreme Admiral Torin arrived aboard a transport painted white instead of the traditional Valorian crimson. A symbol of his intentions, Fleet Admiral Patterson waited in one of the station's conference rooms, reviewing reports on his tablet. He was an older man with gray hair and the steady eyes of someone who had spent decades making difficult decisions. When Torin entered, Patterson stood and offered his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Torin hesitated for only a moment before taking it. The handshake was firm but not aggressive, a sign that both men understood they were here to build something rather than destroy it. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Torin said, taking a seat across the table. I suspect this is not how you imagined first contact between our governments would occur. Wars rarely start the way anyone plans, Patterson replied. But they can end however we choose to end them. Your people made a mistake at Brentis 7. The question is what happens next. My people have made many mistakes, Torin admitted. The words clearly cost him something. We built an empire on the assumption that might makes right, that superior force equals superior civilization. Your dreadnoughts taught us otherwise? We are prepared to discuss terms for a lasting peace. Patterson set down his tablet. Let me be clear about what humanity wants. We don't seek territory in Valorian space. We don't want tribute or reparations. What we want is simple: leave us and our allies alone. Stop expanding through conquest. Release any species under Valorian control that wish to be free. You ask us to dismantle everything we've built over 2 centuries. I ask you to transform it into something better. The Valorian Empire has resources, knowledge, and organizational capability. Use those strengths for trade instead of conquest. Build partnerships instead of collecting subjects. There's more profit in cooperation than domination, and considerably less risk. Torin looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. My people will resist these changes. Our culture celebrates military strength. Our history is written in conquests. How do I convince them to abandon everything they believe makes us great? By showing them the alternative. Patterson pulled up a holographic display showing human trade routes, colony worlds, and economic data. Humanity controls less territory than Valoria, but we're twice as wealthy. Why? Because our colonies are partners, not subjects. They pay fair taxes instead of tribute. They trade freely instead of under coercion. They innovate instead of simply obeying. When you treat people as equals, they give you their best instead of their minimum. Pretty words. But what stops a neighbor from attacking once you've given up military dominance? We never said give up military strength. We said stop using it for conquest. Patterson switched the display to show human defensive positions. We maintain a powerful fleet precisely because we learned the same lesson you're learning now. Strength enables peace. The difference is we use our strength to protect rather than expand. The Dreadnoughts exist so that our colonies can focus on building lives instead of building walls. Torrin studied the data for a long time. If we agree to these terms, what guarantees do we have that humanity won't simply conquer us once we've weakened ourselves? My word, Patterson said simply, and the word of every human who serves in our fleet. We don't want your worlds, Admiral. We want our people safe, and we want the galaxy stable. A Valoria that trades peacefully serves both those goals. A Valoria we've conquered and occupied would drain our resources and breed resentment for generations. Why would we choose the harder path? Because you can? Because you have the power? Power is a tool, not a purpose. We have the power to destroy your empire completely. We also have the power to help you transform it into something better. Which option do you think serves our long-term interests? Torrin was quiet for a moment. You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to trust that we're smart enough to choose partnership over endless occupation. Trust that we'd rather trade with you than police you. Trust that humanity learned from Earth's own bloody history that empires built on force eventually collapse. But communities built on cooperation can last forever. The Valorian admiral pulled out a datapad containing his government's formal proposal. We will agree to a non-aggression pact with humanity. We will release any species in our territory that petition for independence. We will cease military expansion beyond our current borders. In return, we ask for trade agreements, technology exchange in non-military fields, and assistance in managing the transition. Patterson read through the proposal carefully. This is acceptable. I'll add one more term, any species that gains independence from Valoria, and requests it will be offered human protection during their transition period. We won't force this on anyone, but the offer needs to be there. To prevent my hardliners from trying to reconquer them. To give everyone time to adjust to new realities. Your empire won't collapse overnight, Admiral. This will take years. Maybe decades. But if we're patient and honor our commitments, we can turn old enemies into new partners. Torrin signed the document with Valorian biometric authorization. Patterson added his own signature. 2 men, representing 2 species, choosing to build peace from the wreckage of war. As Torrin prepared to leave, he paused at the door. You're Captain Hayes, the one who destroyed our fleet. Does she sleep well at night? Probably not, Patterson admitted. The good ones never do. That's why we trust them with ships like that. They understand the weight of what they carry. Torrin nodded slowly. Perhaps our peoples are not so different after all. Perhaps that's what makes peace possible. 6 months after Brentis 7, the galaxy had transformed in ways both subtle and obvious. Trade routes that had been disrupted by Valorian expansion now flowed freely again. Species that had lived in fear of conquest began to plan for futures beyond mere survival. And humanity, once considered a minor player in galactic affairs, became the name everyone spoke with either respect or caution. News of the battle spread through every trading post and diplomatic channel. The footage was analyzed by military strategists across 100 worlds. Some species saw opportunity in the changing power balance. Others saw warning. But everyone understood that the rules had changed forever. Rebecca Hayes stood on the observation deck of Titan's Wake, watching as construction crews worked on a new space dock orbiting Brentis 7. The colony was expanding, no longer afraid to grow now that protection was guaranteed. Administrator Foster had personally thanked Hayes 3 times, and each time Hayes had simply nodded, and said she was doing her job. "Captain?" Lieutenant Wilson approached, carrying a datapad. "Fleet Command is asking for an updated status report. They want to know if you'll need to return to Earth for maintenance and resupply. Tell them we're fully operational and prefer to remain on station. Thor's hammer can rotate back if they need a dreadnought at home." Hayes turned from the viewport. "How are our new neighbors adjusting?" "The Valorian withdrawal is proceeding smoothly. 3 systems have already declared independence, and human liaison teams are helping them establish new governments. No incidents so far. Seems like Torin is keeping his hardliners under control." Hayes nodded. That was good news. The treaty between humanity and Valoria could have failed a dozen different ways, but both sides were honoring their commitments. Slowly, carefully, old enemies were learning to coexist. Across the galaxy in the Valorian core worlds, Supreme Admiral Torin addressed his fleet commanders. The assembled officers listened with mixed expressions as he outlined the new strategic doctrine: no more conquest. No more expansion through force? The Valorian military would focus on defense and disaster relief, helping rather than conquering. Some officers resigned in protest. Others adapted, finding new purpose in protecting rather than dominating. Torin watched his empire transform and felt the weight of 2 centuries of history pressing on his shoulders. They had been so certain of their superiority, and humans had shattered that certainty in 20 minutes, but from that destruction came something unexpected. Valorian scientists, freed from military priorities, began collaborating with human researchers. Trade agreements brought prosperity that conquest never could, and the species they had once ruled, now independent but protected by human dreadnoughts, bore no grudges when offered fair partnership. In Earth's orbital shipyards, chief engineer Raymond walked the construction bay where Dreadnought number 23 was taking shape. The massive vessel hung in the vacuum, its skeleton of reinforced alloys slowly being covered with the armor plating that would make it nearly invincible. Raymond had built these ships for 20 years, and each one still filled him with pride and sadness. Pride because they represented humanity's finest engineering. Sadness because they existed at all, but this was the reality. The galaxy respected strength, and these ships ensured humanity would never be helpless. His grandson visited that day. A boy of 8 who stared up at the massive construction with wide eyes. "Grandpa, why is it so big?" "Because it needs to protect a lot of people," Raymond explained. "These ships keep us safe so you can grow up without being afraid." "Will there always be ships like this?" Raymond knelt down to his grandson's level. "I hope not. I hope someday we'll live in a galaxy where nobody needs weapons this powerful. But until that day comes, we build them. Because the people who might hurt us need to know that we can defend ourselves." The boy thought about this seriously. "So they're scary on purpose? They're honest on purpose?" "We don't hide what we can do. We show everyone exactly what happens if they threaten innocent people. And then most of the time they choose not to threaten anyone at all. That's the real purpose of these ships. Not to fight, but to prevent fighting." Back on Titan's wake, Hayes received a transmission from Fleet Admiral Patterson. The message was brief and professional, but she could read between the lines. "Well done. The treaty is holding. Humanity is safer because of what you did." She did not feel like a hero. She felt like someone who had done a necessary job and survived to see the consequences. That was enough. Heroes sought glory. Professionals sought results. Hayes had achieved her mission. Brentis 7 was safe. The Valorian threat was neutralized, and peace had been established through strength. That night, Hayes wrote another letter to her daughters. She told them about the new trade routes opening up, about species meeting each other for the first time without fear, about a galaxy slowly learning that cooperation was better than conquest. She did not tell them about the battle, though they would learn eventually. For now, she wanted them to know that their mother was part of building something good. The galaxy turned, indifferent to the small dramas of the species crawling across its surface. But those species were learning, slowly, that survival meant more than dominating neighbors. It meant finding common ground. It meant building trust even with former enemies. It meant creating something that could last beyond any single generation. And somewhere in the dark between stars, 17 human dreadnoughts maintained their watch. Silent guardians of a peace purchased with the demonstration of overwhelming force. They were tools of war that made peace possible, weapons so terrible that their very existence prevented their use. Hayes stood at her viewport and watched the stars, thinking about the future her daughters would inherit. A future where strength enabled kindness, where power protected the vulnerable, where humanity's place in the galaxy was secured not through conquest but through the promise of devastating retaliation against anyone who threatened the innocent. It was not a perfect peace, but it was real, and it was built to last. That was worth defending.